Today, I'm sharing findings from my WomenLift Health project, Coding Identity, an analysis of how elite data scientists describe themselves on LinkedIn and whether gender shapes the way expertise is communicated. For most of us, LinkedIn bios are often the first signal of leadership and expertise. So, gendered patterns in communication may shape who is seen as a leader in AI. If leadership potential is inferred from narrative style, then style, not skill, may be shaping who we see as leaders. In my leadership project, I ask, how do male and female award-winning data scientists describe themselves professionally on LinkedIn? I focus on the LinkedIn bios of 105 Gates-funded AI innovators who won Gates Grand Challenges and AI awards over the last few years. All of them are based in LMICS, which was a requirement of the grant. To explore presentation styles, I use stylometric analysis, a method that looks not at what people write, but at how they write it. I measured sentence structure, readability, personal agency, technical density, and passive voice. Then I used clustering to see what communication patterns naturally emerged and explore differences by gender. Before looking at how AI researchers talk about themselves, I looked at whether they were visible on LinkedIn at all. Women and men were equally likely to have bios or at least a LinkedIn page, but women were almost twice as likely not to have a LinkedIn profile at all, 15% versus 8% of men. So visibility itself seems gendered even before analyzing communication styles. When I looked at how these AI scientists wrote about themselves, I discovered something fascinating. Even though they all work on similar technical domains and are winning highly competitive grants, they communicate in very different ways, even independent of gender. Most awardees fell into a group I call accessible communicators, clear, concise writers whose bios are easy to read and highly audience friendly. This group was about 50% women and 50% men. A smaller group, predominantly men, were self-forward narrative leaders who emphasized personal initiative, first-person storytelling, and leadership actions. A third group, all of whom were men, were dense technical specialists whose bios read more like mini CVs. They were formal, complex, and highly technical. And finally, a small group were reflective passive stylists who use more passive voice and emphasize institutions or roles rather than personal agency. 75% of this group was women. But there is some good news. Most men and women use the accessible communication style. These bios were clear, readable, and effective, which is perhaps not surprising since they are all PIs on highly competitive grants from the Gates Foundation. But here's where gender differences started to show up. Among the smaller group who were not accessible communicators, men and women diverged sharply. Women tended to shift more towards passive, institution-centered communication. Their bios highlight roles, teams, and organizations rather than personal leadership. Men tended to shift towards more authoritative styles, either strong first-person narrative or dense technical presentations. In other words, when communication was less clear, gender defaults seemed to snap into place. Women became more differential, and men became more self-forward or technical. These patterns matter because leadership in AI and in science more broadly is often inferred from communication style, not just competence. If women default to more deferential styles under ambiguity, while men default to more agentic ones, that shapes perceived leadership potential independent of actual skill. The takeaway isn't that women need fixing, women need reframing, not remediation. And programs like WomenLift Health provide that support to help women to be more intentional in how they present themselves so that unconscious communication defaults don't limit how others see their leadership. Throughout WomenLift Health, I've benefited greatly from the self-reflection, introspection, and wisdom of this cohort. I feel less vulnerable being myself and more unapologetic about it. That shift has helped me see my next career move with clarity and confidence. This project also taught me something unexpected. Just as I analyzed how others communicate, I learned how to analyze my own style and make sure the way I show up reflects the leader I actually am, not the defaults that I've absorbed. That to me is the heart of WomenLift Health, helping us recognize and claim the strengths we already bring and making sure they shape how others see us as leaders. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm so excited to be part of the sisterhood of WomenLift Health, and you can find me on LinkedIn, where I'm currently open to work.